So it's just a matter of kind of going the like you said, Sharon, the exercise of going through and knowing what to fill in what and making sure you don't miss anything or whatever. It's best to do obviously via whatever service you're going to use. That's why we were talking about not utilizing Dotloop. Dotloop's okay right now, at least to view things and such, but it's not going to be the service we're going to be using. So now that everything is in DocuSign, and if you go through the tutorials and you learn how to do that, create the opportunity, even if it's a mock client, create the opportunity, create the room, add the documents in there and fill them in. That exercise of doing it will give you that experience so that when you do have the client, you might not be great at it, but at least you're not, freaking out because you kind of remember how to do it.
So if I do all that and I actually send it to a room like I did yesterday, is that going to get me in trouble? Is something actually going to?
No, it's my understanding that's why I was a little confused when you said you sent it to DocuSign. I think the only people that might automatically be part of a room might be admin, like Katie or Carolyn, but I don't even.
I got a notice from the Northville office.
That's them. That's all.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, you're not.
So that's who it was. It wasn't to DocuSign. You just sent it to our office.
Oh, okay.
And so what did they say?
They wanted to know what was going on with it. Why is it still sitting in this room after 24 hours? And I'm like, I don't know.
just respond with, it's just a test.
I'm just
right. I should have put test in front of it.
The good thing is that, our old system, there was no sort of insight until you submitted it for compliance review to make, and ultimately either when you were turning in earnest money deposit or when it closed and you wanted to get paid. Now there's a lot more visibility in all the deals that we have going on. So they're really on top of things, making sure, is there anything that they need to do to go in to make sure that something gets paid or an E&D collected or whatever. So maybe we'll try to ask if there's a specific process they want us using when we're doing kind of test cases, because it's not uncommon to make a test opportunity, right? A dummy opportunity contact and just mess around. You're not going to get in trouble. Nothing's going to happen by accident. I just don't know if there's a best practice way of doing it that doesn't clog up their
their workload.
Yeah.
Right.
But in the meantime, don't worry about it. Just, respond. Oh, it's just a test. If there's another way of doing it, let me know. But nothing wrong. I always do. If I create a fake contact, like your own email or your own, whatever, that way, anything that gets sent, you can see what the clients would get sent and stuff. Just don't do test stuff on a real person, because then they'll.
Well, I was using my husband's.
That's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So going through and understanding that to fill out all the buyer stuff, right? We were in the middle, not in the middle, but we were moving along pretty good. We had to get cut off to the buyer, the step-by-step process of the buyer. Is that right, Sharon?
Yeah. Let me look real quick. Sorry. I
think
we should.
Your appraisal or inspection.
Yeah, because I don't remember where we left off, because where we should be today is back on the listing presentation and talking about listing documents.
Okay, let me button up buyers then, and then we'll move on to that, which a lot of that list process or that transaction process is similar.
So did we got through doing the offer, coordinating the appraisal. Maybe we just got stopped before we talked about the clear to close.
Yeah, I don't remember really buttoning up appraisal. Does anyone recall? I know it's recorded. I should have gone back and looked at it. Well, let me just rehash that. So after you've gone through the inspection process with your buyer, and you've come to one of the ways that ultimately your buyer can move forward as is, the buyer can elect to terminate the contract, or what most likely is going to happen is some sort of negotiations in terms of something that the seller is going to do in order to move forward, whether that's make a repair, adjust the price, or have some sort of dollar concession. Okay. Justin asked me last week, he said, if if the buyers haven't inspected and they just want to move forward, is that okay? Yeah, absolutely. And he said, do you put something in writing? And I typically always do. There's I don't know what the exact form is, satisfaction of inspection, or it's inspection, whatever. But essentially in writing, you're just making it signed upon with all parties that buyers are content with it. And why you would want to do this, because we know that there's a period of days. So what if those expire? Isn't it just assumed that they have to move forward? In the way our PA reads is, if buyer doesn't provide in writing that they're dissatisfied, doesn't that just mean if they don't provide in writing, we're good? Yes. However, as a buyer's agent, I would never want to be brought back on me, the buyer saying, well, I wasn't comfortable with this, or I didn't agree that, or I thought this. So if you put it in writing that the buyers are satisfied and are moving forward, it just alleviates any sort of misunderstanding. And that's signed by the buyers and the sellers. Now, if the buyers identify some issues that they want in actually the seller to fix, it's important to put as much detail as possible in terms of what the sellers are supposed to do to remedy that. What I mean by that is, if it's just like fix faucet, like you got to be more detail oriented in that to write out specifically what they're going to do, right? Such as sellers to have licensed plumber evaluate and remedy kitchen faucet and provide receipts of work upon completion, or something to that regard.
And then you always want to add, buyer reserves the right to reinspect after work has been finished within, I like to say, like within a week of closing or within 10 days of closing. Your buyer may choose not to go back through if they don't want to, but you want to have that opportunity reserved for them, because if they walk through and something's not done to their satisfaction, you'll at least still have a few days to deal with it and talk about it. You don't want to get caught the day of, or when you're going through a walkthrough, that they're not happy with the way something was done.
Justin, throw yourself on mute. I can hear the.
Oh, sorry.
Computer. No worries. Absolutely right, Sharon. If the buyers don't want the seller to do those things, you can simply ask for a price reduction or a concession. Does everyone know the difference between the two? Otherwise, I'll explain it.
It's also, in my opinion, oftentimes, well, it depends on the situation, but if the seller provides concessions or a price reduction, that puts the control in the buyer's hands with regard to who does the work, the quality of the work. You have to make sure that if the seller's doing the repairs, that whatever warranties come with the repair are transferable with the house, not just the person who requested the repair. So there are advantages to just asking for some money so that the buyer can handle it the way they want.
Yeah, especially if when you've walked through the home, you what appears to be a lot of DIY types of fixes, you have to be very careful asking a seller to do those kinds of things, because like you said, who's to say the quality of the work? Who's to say the level? Who's to say who's going to do it? So depending on what that fix is or that repair, you definitely want to be careful. A price reduction is simply going to do that. It's going to, let's say the home's under contract for $200,000 and the buyer wants $1,000 off. You would do a purchase or an addendum rather that states that the price adjustment is $1,000, revised sales price of $199. That doesn't help the buyer in any way. They're paying a little less for the home, but it's not any cash in their pocket in order to do those things. And really $1,000 off a price, if they're financing it, is like $6 a month. So depending on your buyer situation, a concession might make better sense. A concession is simply same situation, $200,000 sales price, $1,000 in repairs. The sales price stays at $200,000, but the buyers are getting $1,000 back. It's like cash back at closing, because the buyers can't receive a written dollar amount from the seller. The seller can't just give them money. So this is a way of transferring money to negate. It just basically $1,000 credit.
Have much to close.
Yeah, it just reduces the dollar amount with their down payment and closing costs. Right? There's a limit to how much a concession can be. It can be anywhere from $3 to 6%, depending on the loan. So, if we're talking about a lot of money, be really careful with that. Ask their lender what the limitations are. But it's a good way for the buyer to essentially offset their costs in order to do those things after the fact. Again,
let's pretend all that's settled, right?
You would, at that point, typically I'm letting know the lender, if I'm representing the buyer, I'm letting know the lender, hey, good news, we're past inspection. We've agreed upon whatever. If it's a concession or a price adjustment, make sure that the lender gets a copy of that addendum so they can revise their records.
Now let me jump in.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, though, we don't send the lender addendums that talk about a bunch of things that need to be fixed. So let's say
it could be red flags.
Right, because they may say, well, what's wrong with the house? Now we're going to change the value, right? So let's say you want them to fix and put some GFI outlets, in the bathroom and whatever, fix a couple doorknobs, just something, fix a sink, and $2,000 in concessions, right, for a driveway. You would have one addendum that says you're going to fix the sinks, and the outlets, and it can say, and you're going to give us $2,000 in concessions for the driveway. That can all be on one. But then you want a second separate one that simply says, buyer and seller agree that seller is going to provide $2,000 in concessions to go towards prepaid taxes, prorated items, closing costs, and or discount points, period. You're not going to say why. And that's the one that goes to the lender.
It doesn't matter, what the concessions are to be used for or not to be used for, if that's been part of your negotiations. It's that everyone agrees to. So like Sharon said, if that's on there, a lender, especially right now in this environment where people are looking to tighten things up, we don't want to raise any red flags, right? Just like when we don't include personal property in a purchase agreement. So if they want the golf cart with the house, they don't put that in the purchase agreement. You put it on a separate addendum that the lender does not get a copy of. So it's you're not like doing any mortgage fraud or anything like that. You're just making sure that you're putting in writing what isn't going to cause any delays or further inspections or affect the appraisal. Yeah. So I'm letting know after the inspection, the lender, I'm letting them know that they can order the appraisal if they have not already. The reason why typically they will wait is that the appraisals used to be paid at closing typically. Most of the time now they're paid up front. And the reason that transitioned is because lenders were paying for appraisals of properties that never ended up closing. So they wanted to make sure that they got that money up front. I know Keller Mortgage is a little different. They don't charge it up front or something like that.
If the deal doesn't close, you don't get paid. You don't have to pay it.
So the buyer is going to have to pay that out of their pocket, usually to the mortgage company, not the appraiser directly, but that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $400. And I tell them, I told them to wait off to do that, or oftentimes they do on their own, is because until you're moving forward with the purchase after inspection, that at that point, go ahead and order the appraisal. The mortgage lender is going to submit the order to an appraisal company that they work with, and the appraiser is going to be randomly selected for them. Every company is a little different, but it's important to understand that there's not a direct connection necessarily because of Dodd-Frank and all these things that from the mortgage meltdown of lenders manipulating appraisals, they made the process basically be arm's length. So they hire the appraisal done. The appraiser is going to be assigned, and then it's going to reach out to the listing agent, either by phone typically, or they're going to, if they're sophisticated, maybe just request it via showing time, just like an appointment would be. But they're reaching out to the seller or the listing agent rather to schedule that. Okay. So oftentimes, unless you have a great lender that's keeping you up to date, you might not know what's going on as far as when it's ordered, when it's scheduled. Does that make sense? But we wait for that appraisal. Now the appraiser is going to go to the property. Typically they're going to do some of their report ahead of time. So they're going to get there, and most people are really surprised at how quick an appraisal is, because they're just verifying things that they've already gathered. So they're going there to, snap some photos, right? some people, oh, do I have to be all picked up? Do I have to be all staged like I was selling? No, not necessarily. Make sure they have access to everything, but it's going to be really quick, and they're not going to ding you on your value if your house is kind of messy. They're verifying bedrooms, bathrooms, size, yard. They're filling in a report that they've already started, and then they're going back to their office to complete it. They're looking at comparables. The most important thing for them is other homes that have sold. We've done countless classes and trainings around appraisals. It's an art, not a science. I'll say that. That's why these automated value models don't necessarily give the most accurate at all times, because they can't factor in a lot of things that we know are unique. They just do location, price per square foot, bedrooms, bathrooms, and such. On the listing side, though, I always make it a point to be at appraisals. Some appraisers are more welcoming than others, but there's nothing saying that you can't be. As a buyer's agent, though, you're kind of just at the mercy. Your buyers can't be there. You can't be there. You just hope and pray that it goes well. Okay. The appraiser is going to go back, complete their report, submit it to their company. Then that's going to be submitted to the mortgage lender. So this process could be a number of days. All right. So when everyone's on pins and needles waiting for an appraisal to come back, just know that if it happened yesterday, it might not get all clear until like next week. Okay.
I would say I usually always tell my clients 10 days from when we order it is when we should actually hear back and have like an official number.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes you'll talk to a lender and they'll look on their little status screen and they'll say, looks like it's done, but the report hasn't uploaded yet. The number hasn't hit. And that takes another couple days and you're just waiting.
Yeah.
You know?
And then they often say, okay, we're all good. And it's like, well, what do you mean all good? Like usually it's great. It came in at value or above. Everyone typically asks, what did it come in at? My experience, most of the time it comes in right at the purchase price, right? And it's not necessarily because that's just what it's worth per se. It's because the appraiser just has found enough evidence to support the purchase price, and they're trying not to get necessarily in trouble for maybe putting a higher dollar amount. We hear about appraisals coming in low, and they do happen. And it's probably it's not the norm, let's say. But it does happen. So until you get the all clear, you're kind of on pins and needles a little bit. Then the buyers might say, well, what did it come in at? Well, I don't know. The lender will have to tell you that. They're entitled to a copy of it. The listing agent and the sellers are not. All they care about that is it came in at value. Now, it's important to know that if you, like the situation we just talked about, a $200,000 sales price, and then there's $1,000 in concessions, let's say, the seller's only going to net $199,000, right? Because they're getting $200,000, then they're giving $1,000 back. But that property still has to appraise at $200,000. Okay. So if your appraisal is low, there's multiple things that you can do to renegotiate or negotiate, including adjusting concessions and stuff if those have them in there. But this is a hard one to go over theoretically. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and maybe there'll be another class coming up about that where you can learn a little bit more. Typically we like to invite an appraiser in. But once you've got the appraisal back, great. You'd think, okay, great, we can close. Not necessarily. At that point, you're waiting on the clear to close, meaning that the lender has reviewed everything. The underwriter, which is essentially the
bean counter at the bank.
Yeah. They cross the T and they dot the I's, and they make sure everything, and they scrutinize everything, right? Bank statements. Has any money come in that's not accounted for? Is everything, they take a look at that package very diligently and may ask the buyer for additional documentation and things. They also get a copy of the appraisal, and then they essentially are giving their final stamp before that they can issue a clear to close. Clear to close, CDC, CTC, that's like the best thing that you can wait for, because once you have that, awesome, you can actually schedule the closing day and time. Until that point, it's kind of like this goal that everyone's working towards, but no lender, or the lenders and typically the title companies, aren't going to put in ink the day and time of closing until you have that clear to close.
Because then the title companies also, once the title and all of us receive a clear to close and everyone schedules a closing date, that's when the title company starts putting together their statements, because they need to calculate prorations on taxes and homeowners association and homeowners insurance and all sorts of stuff based on the absolute exact day that everyone's signing and closing. So the title company still has more work to do that they can't start until that clear to close and that scheduled closing time and date is established.
Because if your buyers are putting 20% down, right, and you're going to close, you're looking at Friday and then it changes to Monday, that down payment percentage doesn't change. What does change though is the dollar prorations for what the seller's mortgage payoff is, because it's a few days later. What does change is the prorations for the amount of property taxes that are being collected, or interest rates that's being collected, or homeowners association dues. So like Sharon said, they've got to calculate all of that and redo it if that date changes. So they want to make sure that you're good. Now, a clear to close is going to allow a closing typically minimum within 3 days. Before the mortgage meltdown, there were people being presented with closing documents that they'd never seen before, and they were signing, and a lot of them signed things that they just didn't understand that would adjust rates, prepayment penalties, all these crazy things that the government came in and just abolished. And which is great for consumers. The other thing that they did was made a mandatory amount of time between any changes that were made in the financing and actual closing that gave buyers the amount of time to review those things. We call it like the 3-day rule. Okay. So if they provide a clear to close on a Monday and they send the closing disclosure to the buyers that they sign off on it and they don't make any more changes, the minimum that you can close is 3 days later. Now,
it's important to know. I'm sorry. It's important to know what you just said. It's not when the bank issues the clear to close. It's when I guess it is. It's when the client signs their closing disclosure. So sometimes they can sign it up until 11:59 p.m. on a day.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Right? It's to the minute when that 3-day clock starts.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't mean like if they sign that at 11:55 p.m., you can't close for 72 hours at 11:55. It's business day. So you want to get in before that cutoff. So you just have to be in good communication, especially if you're in a time crunch, that everyone understands that. Now, if they sign that and you go back and you revise something, right, and that changes the lender's numbers and they have to reissue, they might need another 3 days then. So be prepared for closings to potentially be pushed depending on how everyone's got their ducks in a row. You've got a lot of moving parts at this moment. Real estate, a lot is hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait. Everything is really important to get done as soon as possible. And then there's like this downtime. This is one of those things where it's, buyers don't understand. A lot of newer agents don't understand. There's people working. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, right? But it doesn't mean that we can just close tomorrow. That 3 days, it's important to note, it's not business days and it's not weekdays. It's days excluding Sunday. So it includes Saturday, which is really weird. So anyways, once you have that clear to close, you've set a day and time. Typically, the listing agent or the seller denotes where a closing is going to take place. It's like they have like the ability to drive because they're the seller. That's under normal circumstances. Right now, everybody's closing separate locations and such, but we probably will go back to a little bit normalized after this. Now, when I say that they get to determine where the closing is, it's got to make sense. If the property's in Livonia and the listing agent's is in Macomb and everyone else is around here, it's silly to have everyone go out to Macomb to sign. So you just have to use, your best judgment and just have conversation with the listing agent. I'm a team player. I'm not going to make my people drive all around town if it doesn't make sense. But I'm also not going to be bullied around. So if everyone wants to go to Macomb, but my buyers are convenient for Livonia, the property is in Livonia, I'm going to figure out what I can do to have my people sign in Livonia. A split closing, a true split closing, meaning the buyer and the seller in different places, is okay. It's a little bit more work for the title company to exchange docs, but it can happen. I got a note here.
Let's talk about.
What about, Jordan just asked, what about closings happening all electronically? To my knowledge, they have not gotten 100% electronic yet. They probably will, but there's still things that need to be wet signed with blue ink for recording of deeds and such. I know that Quicken, I think a few other companies have some products that can be electronically signed, but not all title companies are completely on board. This is probably going to push them to do that. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean you can sign from your home? Maybe not. I actually think you have to go and have some sort of notary verify your identity or something. I'm not sure exactly, but it's probably on the horizon,
Yeah.
right? We can
And I
sign
think-
all documents and do all addendums electronically, so it only makes sense.
I think that that's state driven, because I think that there might be some states where you can, if I'm not mistaken. But I wanted to touch a little bit on scheduling the closing. You need to find the balance between not communicating enough and over communicating, right? You need to strike that good balance in the middle, because you are trying to coordinate a buyer, a seller, a buyer's agent, a listing agent, a seller side title, and a buyer side title, for everybody to know the same time, date, and place. So the way I do it is I communicate individually with the other agent and ask them what works for them, what and where. And then I go back and forth with my client, they go with their client. And if we come up with a range, in the afternoon of this day and this place would work, then if I'm I'll do it anyway, loop in the title companies and the agents, not the clients, and suggest a time and place and get confirmation for it. The reason why I do that is because you want to avoid all of the back and forth of, yes, this works for me, that doesn't work for me, this place does, that place doesn't, how about this time, how about that time? Because then there comes a point where people are getting flooded with emails and they don't know which one's the latest one. People get frustrated. I thought it was 11. No, your last email said noon. Didn't you see it? It turns into a mess and people get really stressed out. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, your fault or not, you as the agent are the one who it's projected upon you, right? If it's a good experience, you get to enjoy the results of that and the reputation of that. If it's a stressful experience, it's your fault, at least in their mind, right? So you want to do whatever you can to just keep it smooth for everybody. Because there have been cases where people end up in different spots a half hour away because there was miscommunication on however many emails were going back and forth. So be really mindful of that. What are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, completely agree. I tend to get really detailed on this regard because I've dealt with so many agents and people that are not proactive that I don't want anything to drop between the cracks. And I really like what you just said, Sharon, because you've got yourself representing, let's say in this case, a buyer. You've got the listing agent representing the seller. You've got oftentimes two title companies, right? Buyer, seller, and you've got a mortgage person. It's a lot of people, right? And all of those other people have multiple transactions going on, especially the title people. So I have a conversation with the other agent. We talk about what works. Typically, the title companies can accommodate you, right? So I'm having a sidebar with the other agent, right? We're talking about what's going to work. So that then I'm saying, okay, great. So I've got everyone on this email, and I said, we've talked. Buyer and seller are good with this day and this time, blah, blah, blah. And we're kind of making sure everything's good. And if that day and time does work, right, I always send a calendar invite, right? So it's absolutely you don't have to decipher different emails. You're actually getting an invite, right? Or sometimes the title company sends a calendar invite, right? Location, day, time, right? It's all very clear. So it's not ambiguous. And you will just deal with people that are non-responsive and this and that. And you just have to be you have to step it up and really make sure, because at the end of the day, like you said, it doesn't matter what finger to point. You have to protect your clients. It's all about making their experience great. So you've gotten a closing date, right? Wonderful. You're looking forward to it. Your buyers are looking forward to it. You've got the actual day and time set. Buyers that are bringing money to closing, right, for their down payment and closing costs, very often it's a wire now. It's an electronic wire that they have to do through their bank. I think the cashier's check has to be, if they allow it, if the title company allows it, has to be under a certain dollar amount. So most of the time it's going to be a wire. You'll find most buyers, they've never done a wire. They don't really know what it is. They typically have to go into their bank branch to do it. It's paperwork. It's account, a routing number, a dollar amount. There needs to be some codes that they provide. Those instructions, those wire instructions, can never come from you. In fact, they should never come via email. And why this might be, you'll hear wire fraud out there. And how basically they do it is, hackers will hack an email address, typically realtors, and they'll see all these emails going about a transaction. They'll find that buyer's email address, right? And they will email them from a cloned account, something that looks like it's coming from you or something that's coming from a title company. And right before closing, they'll say, hey, it's FYI, these are revised wire instructions, or these are the wire instructions, right? It's got a bank account. It looks on letterhead. It looks all legit, but it's fraudulent. It's the hacker's bank account. So the buyer, they go into the bank, they provide these instructions, and then their wire goes to Nigeria or somewhere crazy. And that money is literally gone. There's nothing that they can do about that.
Tell them your story.
Sidebar. So I deal with this is especially embarrassing because I talk about this stuff and I know better. I was going to go, it got canceled, but I was going to go on a trip this month to Argentina, and I had provided deposit and such, but I was planning this for my brother and my friend and myself. So the second part of my payment was due a couple months ago. So I went to my bank and I provided the wiring instructions. And while I was actually on that Disney cruise, Justin was there, I got an email from the outfitter, and they said, hey, just FYI, let us know if you've sent money because our system got hacked. And my stomach just dropped. I was like, what? And they said, someone hacked our account and our servers, and you may have received email wiring instructions. And I was like, I did. And I did wire over $7,000 to them. And it looked everything legit, right? But I should have followed up. I should have said, hey, because I had the guy via WhatsApp. I should have said, I got this updated wiring instructions. Can you verify this? Like, I did not. I didn't trust my gut. I just kind of went with it. Thank God, because it was international, that I was able to immediately put a notify fraud on my account, which then the receiving end in Mexico, wherever the hell it was, they flagged it and I got my money back.
Because it had just happened, right?
Yeah, it just happened.
Wired.
But there's been countless buyers that have lost tens of, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the FBI can get involved and stuff, but the actual chance of recovering it is very slim. So when we talk about not forwarding wire instructions, I truly mean your buyer has to call the title company. The title company person on the other end will verify them, and they will give them verbally all of the wiring instructions, the account, the router, the bank name, whatever.
Or sometimes they might send them a message via secure portal.
Yeah.
But
nothing ever from you, nothing forwarded from you. Just keep yourself out of it. You can't be held accountable if you just have nothing to do with it. So I'm very adamant about it. Even forwarding emails, I won't say this enough. Just nothing to do. Buyer, call title company. I know you want to do everything for our clients. This is one of those things, and they just need to understand why. They're going to have to do that before closing. Maybe the day before, sometimes the morning after. It doesn't matter. They're wiring money to the title company, who's not dispersing it to everyone until everything's signed. So It could be sitting with the title company for a week. It doesn't matter to them. But
realize that it takes some time after everything that happened back in the mid-2000s. It goes from whatever bank they're wiring it out of to a Fed, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a hub, right? And then it goes to the Fed, then it comes back. So it's not instant. And sometimes it's not even a couple hours. Sometimes it can be 3 or 4 hours. It depends on the time of day. If you have a closing at the end of the day, if you do it first thing in the morning, you're probably okay. But if you have a closing before noon, do it the day before.
Yeah.
You know, even I've had clients that say, oh, well, my bank says it'll happen immediately. Don't, because then you're sitting there in the middle of the closing room waiting, just sitting
Yeah,
there.
and if your buyers sign everything and they don't have the money, even if they
Money
have
is-
the money, the title company has the money from their lender, right? The loan amount, they will not disperse keys or commission checks. The
Nothing.
buyers signed everything and aren't going to get the keys until they have their money from their down payment. Even if it's on the way, doesn't matter. So
And those are fun conversations when everyone's sitting around a conference room.
you're just waiting. They're just checking, refreshing to see if the money came in.
Yep.
Um,
And then
So
I'm
I-
always hoping that the seller doesn't start talking too much and saying something about the house that the buyer didn't know about. It's like, oh God, can we just get out of here?
yeah. Justin, go ahead.
So I think I might have just missed this before you started talking about the wire transfers, but you say majority of the time that's what they do in closings?
Yeah.
Yeah, every title company has their own policy. I think Legacy, for instance, is any dollar amount, 15,000. If it's more than $15,000, it's going to require a wire, not a cashier's check. But
Okay.
I would set the expectation that all transactions you're going to have to wire funds.
And every
Okay.
title company is different. So you'll want to check that. If your client thinks that they can just, if they mention, well, I'll just bring a check or, you know, whatever, call
Yeah.
the title company and find out what their policy is.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
when they
Gotcha.
say check,
Okay.
it's a cashier's certified bank
Yeah.
check. It's not
No
personal check.
checks.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
Prior to closing, your buyer's entitled to do a walkthrough, right? Depending on your purchase agreement. Ours says 48. I try to do a walkthrough right before a closing, but it also depends on, is your buyer getting possession right away? Meaning at closing, do they get the keys and they get to go in and the house is theirs? Either way, the house is theirs, I should say. But if the seller has occupancy, meaning they can stay in the home for a specified amount of time, it means at closing, their stuff's not necessarily out of it, right? Your buyer's still entitled to do a walkthrough. Buyers have to understand that they're about to sign and own the home and essentially be renting it back to these people that are in it right now. But their house is still going to be lived in, right? Most of the time it's even going to be worse because there's boxes, they're packing, they're doing all this crap. So it's important for your buyers to understand that, because and that goes back to setting expectations ahead of time with occupancy in the first place. You know, if your buyers want the keys right away, that they need to understand that they're what giving occupancy really means, because essentially at closing, they own the home, they become landlords.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Utilities, if they're getting keys at closing, possession at closing, they're going to want ahead of time make sure that they contact the utilities and put them in their name, set up an account, typically gas and electric. Water is one of those things, if it's city water, that doesn't really get put in an account. It goes with the property. That's why we do final water reads. Final water read is basically the city or township going out, reading the water meter level, because these are billed quarterly oftentimes, and they're saying, well, we can't switch it from one account to the other, but we're going to record what's been used in this quarter up to this date, and we're going to go back and calculate what the bill is for that period of time, and the seller or previous owner is going to be responsible for that period of time, and your buyer is going to be responsible for that period of time going forward.
Right.
All right. I know it sounds really complicated, but what they typically do is keep some of the seller's proceeds, right? Water escrow, $200, $400, it depends. And they're going to say, all right, we're keeping this from the seller's proceeds. This is their money, but we're not going to release it to them with everything else. And when that final bill comes in, we're going to pay that final water bill out of this, or wait for proof of pay that it has been paid. Then we're going to release that to the seller. Okay. So that final water read needs to be completed by the seller or the seller's title company. And that's really to make sure that the seller is responsible for the water up until that point.
So if it's your listing, because this process, I think, encompasses both sides.
Yeah.
About a week prior, maybe even 10 days prior, when you know when closing is going to be, you need to call the municipality and order that final water reading, because some cities will take a couple weeks before they can come out. Now, if the final water reading's a day before closing or 2 days after, it's pennies, and that's not a big deal. Just make sure you get it ordered.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, this says seller side.
Okay, so if your sellers have occupancy, they don't have to do the like gas and electric. Typically, they're going to be responsible for that from the time that they live in the home. So if you're not getting possession immediately, tell your buyers to hold off setting those accounts up, or I should say, putting them in their name until they're going to get the keys when the sellers have finally moved out. Does that make sense?
And the reason it's important for both the buyer or both the homeowner and the buyer to call into the utility companies and request that transfer service is because the homeowner just turns off utilities. When the buyer comes along, they're going to have to pay for new hookup fees. It could be over $150 for them to do that. So in order to make it cost effective and easy for everybody, one person has to just call and say, I'm selling my home on this date, transfer it out. Another person calls and says, transfer it in. And on that date, the utility company will make the switch and it'll be easy for everybody.
Yeah. And you don't want, especially in the cold weather, you don't want the gas to be shut off in the pipes to freeze, or the electric to be turned off and have no security at the house or air conditioning or anything like that. So,
Let me see if there's a different sheet. Sorry.
for buy side or sell
Yeah.
side,
Yeah.
there is one in the launch, I think session 5.
That's what I was just in. So I think it's in 4 for the buyers.
Oh yeah, it is.
I had the wrong one open.
Oh, it's okay. See, a lot of the steps are the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the actual closing, it's really just a formality, right? Your buyers are going to receive all the documentation that they're going to sign ahead of time. So after they sign that that's closing disclosure, and the title companies are both crunching their final numbers, they'll be able to release to each of their respective parties. So if you're representing the buyer, the buy side title company is going to send you all the documentation that the buyer is going to sign at the actual closing, including what basically looks like an accounting statement of checks and balance, deposit, debits and credits that break down the dollar amount that they have to bring to closing. It's going to have the sales price, any concessions, their earnest money deposit, that's a credit to them, plus any prorations and costs and whatnot. You're going to have to go over that with your buyer so that they understand that. In addition, there's all the other documents that they're going to sign at closing that they're going to have the opportunity to read. So if they have questions about them or don't understand something, you can nip that in the butt ahead of time. It all depends on the situation, but some I've seen situations where these were all done like an hour before the actual signing, right? That's not ideal. And it was usually because of revisions needed to be done, right? Dollar amounts were correct or whatever like that. It doesn't necessarily mean the closing had to be pushed because they're actual, but the prorations and things may have changed. So make sure that you get that from the title company. You review it with your buyer and you ask questions, right? The closer that's there to actually sign your buyers is a wealth of knowledge and going to be able to answer things, but they're not going to be able to change anything at that closing, or if they do, it's going to be a real pain in the ass. So make sure that your buyers review that. So when they go to closing, they're like, yep, I've looked it all up, and they're just ready to sign away. They may have questions, and that's okay, but they're not like glaring concerns, because depending on the type of clients you have, a closing is relatively pressury and quick. So if they're the type of people that really want to make sure they're not just signing things, they need to evaluate those things ahead of time in the comfort of their own home. Does that make sense? Because in a closing, you could have two parties, you have all these people, you have talking, and it's like it's not the most relaxed situation. Now on the sell side, you just have to understand the dollar amount that you're netting, and they're usually just happily signing away, because it's kind of like, oh, I'm just gonna check and I'm out. So just be aware of that. But as an agent, you're kind of just there as a formality. You're not really doing anything, but collecting a package or a check at the end. But just be that sounding board for your clients. And if they don't understand something, make sure you find out so you can talk to them. Or if you need a three-way, get someone from the mortgage or the mortgage guy or the title person on the phone, and make sure that you do that so that their questions are answered. At closing, you get well, they were giving copies of everything at closing, right? Everyone signed. Here's a big package, right? It's in a white envelope and there's a check. Now it's going pretty much all digital. So they're just scanning those things, saving some trees, sending them digitally, which is awesome. Even our commissions check, they're typically wiring, at least Legacy is wiring to our market center, which is awesome. When you're representing a buyer, keep in mind that your commission check, I say this from experience, you're going to see the commission check and you're going to think to yourself, this is light. Why is this $5,000 less than it should be? Don't make a big deal out of it, right? It's an awkward time too. Keep in mind that your buyer wrote an earnest money deposit check, typically to our brokerage. So that dollar amount's being held by Keller Williams. Okay. So if we're already holding $5,000 and the total commission's $10,000, your commission check at closing is only going to be for $5,000 because we're already holding on to $5,000, right? Does that make sense? Now, if the commission check is $20,000, or I'm sorry, the earnest money deposit's $20,000, right? So we're holding $20,000, but the actual commission total is only $10,000. You're going to actually have to submit a request for our market center to give that overage that we're holding on to the title company ahead of time. Kind of confusing. You're probably never going to have to worry about it. Just be mindful, right, that the dollar amount that you're going to receive in commission at closing is going to be reduced by the earnest money deposit that we're already holding on to. Okay. So when you get that package or when you get that commission check or whatever, turn that into the market center office. You're not going to be paid unless you have all your ducks in a row in terms of compliance. What I mean by that is all the documentation has to be uploaded into Command that was been signed via DocuSign or wet sign, whatever it is, however it's signed, it's got to be PDF'd and uploaded in there. So when they go in, and this is why we have that breakdown of those documents that need to be there, not all just the closing docs, but also the contract docs, the disclosures, they need to be in there. Katie in our office or the front desk will stamp everything's in there, it's signed, and then they will allow the commission to be released to you. This is important because if you have a closing on Thursday, you should, at that time, the only thing that is missing is the closing docs. Everything else you've already gotten done. If not, you will not be paid until that's done. The last thing you want to be doing is chasing your client around to get something signed that you should have had signed a week before. That will hold closing.
So when you have all of your documents in Command, you're going to submit them. Like he said, Katie or the girls downstairs are going to make sure you have everything you need. If anything's missing, they will send you a message and they'll tell you you're missing this, or you need to sign a line on one of the documents that you forgot. So you give yourself that time. I've done it. I've walked into a closing and said, can you just sign the bottom of this one piece of paper? You know, something that I forgot, but at least I'm doing it right there at the closing table, right? Like Matt was saying, it's not after the fact bugging them about stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. This just goes back to making sure you have all your documentation and you keep it organized. I've been keeping on Google Drive, like my own Drive cloud. I save all the paperwork documents because we were in transition. I'm not Sharon, I know until recently even kept hard copies of them, but the point is just to make sure that you have all of your documentation, because you've got stuff being signed and countered and this and that, just making sure you keep everything in a safe place in order to make sure that you have it. So you're not chasing this crap after the fact.
I keep it digitally now.
Good.
And it's also an easy place because it happens, a couple months later, you'll get a question, maybe from your client about something, you can just go back really quickly, especially the closing package, right?
Yep. So you turn it in, great, celebrate. Depending on what the circumstances are, if your buyer's taking possession right away, great. They're going to the home, they're taking pictures, it's cool. They got the keys. If the sellers had possession, right, you need to make sure that you're clear in terms of what the steps are for them to actually exchange the keys. Sometimes they don't have a date for that. Maybe it's up to 30 days, but it's like, hey, we just have to keep in touch to see how the seller's move out is progressing. It's a little ambiguous, right? So you just want to make sure you talk about that. Because when we say a seller has 30 days of occupancy, depending on how the agreement was written or the addendums that were written, they could at 25 days be out and only be responsible for paying for 25 days. So, if your buyers have any like vacations planned or anything like that, you just want to make sure you look at a calendar and you plan accordingly, right? Because when the sellers do move out, right, you're going to basically do another walkthrough, and that walkthrough is after everything has been gone, right? And it's the buyer's final time to take a look at everything to say the sellers did move out as they should. They did leave the keys, the garage disposal, the garage remote, all the things that they should have left in the home, they left, and they left it in the same condition that they should have, right? And then the buyer signed something called a key exchange form, identifying or acknowledging the fact that everything was great. We took the keys at this day and time, and that the dollar amount that's being held with the title company for occupancy or for security gets released. We're all good, right? So that walkthrough, you got to be there, right? You want to make sure that you're there as well. So a lot of moving parts. The sellers don't have to be there. The buyers can pass or whatever. But if you have one of those situations, we'll walk you through it because there's a lot of different things that can happen. But you just want to make sure, my point is that after closing, depending on what's next, is you're not just like, oh, done, right? Because there's still work to do. I'm going to jump to the list side, right?
Well, but one thing here at the very end of this, well, I don't know if you were just going to, make sure now that everything's closed, that you have everything in command and everything in your database about this client. Now you can tag them as a client or a past client, however you want to organize your people. You can put in a home anniversary date because you know what day they moved in. Make sure, because this is when you've been talking to them the most, that you have everything you could possibly need and that contact's at 100%.
Yeah, even a follow-up plan, right? I don't know if there's a post-close smart plan yet.
Not specifically that
if you know, like, I mean, you better do a 3-day check-in, a 7-day check-in, maybe if you know they're getting the keys right away. I know people that would send their buyers a pizza, right? Because people are moving in, you know what day they were moving in, and you're going to drop off. It's always a great thing. I'll drop off a case of beer and a pizza, whatever it is that you want to do to check in and make sure that after the sale you are staying on top and making sure that things are good. That should be part of that plan, right? And like Sharon said, a tag. I have a past client tag, right? So they immediately get tagged that. You go on Zillow and I acknowledge or claim the sale.
Reviews.
Yeah, even if you don't have a Zillow, you need to have a Zillow profile. But even if you're not a Premier agent, you don't have to pay Zillow to claim all of your past sales on there. You should do that. Ask them for a review if you should have already. So making sure your post-closing kind of checklist is solid, and that you've got the dates that you're going to follow up with them, hopefully automated. Yep. And we'll flip to sell side now.
Yep.
Questions so far? You guys have been quiet. It's a lot, huh?
So I was thinking, Jean, if you want tomorrow, and Justin, of course, if you want, we could jump online together and share my screen and just kind of try to navigate our way through some of those rooms, some of that DocuSign stuff if you want. You're muted.
Yeah, sounds good.
You too, Jean? Yes?
I can do that.
So I think Katie's doing that tomorrow too.
Oh, is she? All right. Well, maybe then
12 o'clock.
Maybe it's better just to do that then, and then maybe write down questions or things that weren't clear, and then we can figure out a time to figure that out.
I have that on my calendar for tomorrow.
Okay. So just do Katie's at noon, and if there's things that still seem confusing, write them down. And then we'll try to figure it out.
Okay.
So do I have a question. So to get set up on DocuSign, do we have to get passwords or something from Jess or somebody, or how do we get that set up?
If you go through your settings in Command, I believe that you can connect your account. Whoops. Wrong one. Ooh. Hold on.
That's what I did. I already am connected with it.
Yeah. Guys, I gotta get out of here. How do I just get to? Ah! There we go.
Oh, okay, here under settings, connected
Yeah.
app.
Yeah. Are you connected?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Then
must have already set that up.
you should already be okay then.
I
Okay.
just don't think we were using it yet because I did the last time we did the class, I submitted mine through Dotloop to you
Yeah.
guys.
This just kind of went active last week, I think, or maybe
Okay.
10 days ago, but not much, no earlier than that.
So do you access DocuSign through their site or through command?
Through command. So here.
Oh, Katie's going to go over that tomorrow.
Yeah.
You
So
can probably access your account via the app too, just like we've been using a Dotloop app. I just don't know how to do that or the login credentials.
So here's my
Okay.
listing that I just put up, right, last week.
Okay.
So you have the opportunity, and then did you see that where it was?
No, at the
Okay. So this is when you look at opportunities, right?
okay.
So it's an active listing. So actually, I could change this, which is my favorite part, right? It's under, I'm grabbing it and I'm moving it and it's under contract. Okay. So under contract, you just click on the address. These are the details from what and I'm not going to go through creating it all right now, you know.
Yeah.
So under documents, I'm going to have my listing documents in here, and then under contract, I haven't put them in yet. Okay. This is where everything would be. So right here where it says go to transaction, you see that?
Yeah.
You click on that. I don't know why it doesn't automatically put me in, but. So it takes you into the room. So this is the room. Instead of a loop, they call it a room. So
Okay.
instead of a room, this is my room for this particular property.
Okay.
And these are the different things.
So you add these forms or are they already pre-sitting?
You add them. So
Okay.
here, this little add button,
Yeah.
it's, if you go to DocuSign forms, Katie's going to go through all of this,
Yeah. Okay.
right? And this part slows down. It takes a while. So you're going to have the opportunity to go through and add predetermined groups like listing documents, buyer, purchasing documents, or you're going to have the option to go single form by form by form and add them. The same way in Dotloop, we had all the KW forms or we had them in packages. So that's in here too. So this is going slow and it's not pulling up right now, but
Can I ask you a different question?
here it is. See, in groups or the library. So if you
Oh,
go,
okay. I didn't even know you could do the groups.
so these are all the KW 140. These are all the things for our market center, right?
Perfect. Yeah.
But if you go here in groups, it's going to be lease packages,
Oh, nice.
tenant, right? So that's how you would dump in a group of blank forms.
Okay.
Anyway, what's your next question?
It was just on the when you have your contacts, because now we're talking about putting the deals together.
Yep.
When you open up at the when you're editing, and you can put add more information, and you have your sales pipeline, and it says stage captured, connected. What is that?
What's the definition of those?
Yeah, for your sales pipeline and being able to record where you're at with them, with your contacts in the process.
So that's a good question. Every CRM defines leads differently, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Matt? How do you think? To me, connected is that I've connected with them, right? I have a relationship with them. Captured means they're mine. But am I wrong? Or is it the other way around?
Yeah, this is kind of your own, I think, for your own personal thing. Yeah, a lead is someone is someone who's clicked or acknowledged or done something, or you have the ability to find because you found them, but you haven't really like connected with. You haven't like turned them into a contact. You
Yeah.
haven't converted them, right? So once a
Right.
lead, most of your people are going to be contacts right now. So once
Right.
you have a contact, I mean, I've got a lot of different contacts. You know, they're all lumped into just as contacts, but some of them could be, I know that this person wants to buy in the next year. I know this person would sell tomorrow if they could get the right price. Other people, it's they're just a person, right? They're just someone I know. They're not like in a pipeline of a future buyer, or future seller, right? They're
Right.
or at least I don't have any knowledge of it. So it all depends on what system you want to use. I know that the people that have lots of leads coming in have like a system where it's like, all right, well, lead comes in and we've attempt one attempt, or two attempts, and then we've connected, but we haven't converted them to a contact, so they're labeled a blah blah blah. I don't really know. I mean, it all depends on what you personally want to do.
Yeah. So it says, so on here, like you said, for the lead, so obviously important thing about lead is if it's marked as lead, that's an indication you need to get in contact with them, follow up with them. And then it says, then under that you can choose add to sales pipeline.
Yep.
And then from there, so then, okay, like you said, this is, custom for me. So I can keep track in the way I want to do that, in whatever way I want to do that. But, so connect, okay.
I
captured, you were saying, Sharon, they're yours.
Yeah.
well,
They're ready to sell.
as we're
Ready to sell.
talking, I'm Googling, and I'm just going to share this PDF. It's a cheat sheet from Scott Leroy Marketing on
Okay.
all the command stuff.
Yeah, I
And
need to get onto more of those.
there are many, many pages in this. So I think that in this, there's going to be definitions, right? If you want to use it in the way that it was created, right? But ultimately, I think as long as you understand why you're tagging people in a certain way and you
Right.
know how to follow up with them, then
That's the goal.
what matters.
If you're not, unless you're generating many leads, like the big teams do, that are very small, conversion rates, where they want to track, how many leads came in, how many actually were captured. I think for us, at least from my business, it's most important within a contact, making sure if they're in a pipeline, right, making sure that okay, well, I've created an opportunity for them, and they have tags on them as appropriate. They have a smart plan associated with them to make sure they don't fall between the cracks. That's kind of where I typically am focused.
What do you mean about create an opportunity, unless it's actually like?
So keep in mind, you do not have to create an opportunity only when someone's actually agreed to sign something.
Okay.
For instance, if I've gone on a listing appointment and they have not decided to list, but they also haven't told me that they're not listing with me, they have an opportunity.
I'll do one.
Okay.
So
essentially,
Keep talking.
my opportunities are my pipeline, right?
Okay.
Not just deals that I get under contract and actually are moving through the process, but the opportunities that I have created because I've taken a lead or a referral to a contact.
So here, I took
She's got 6 listings that are cultivating. Probably none of these are signed, but she knows that she's working through those people because they've raised their hand and said, hey, I either want to sell, or she's gone on a listing appointment. They just haven't decided to do.
They're just not ready, right?
Okay, because I have a couple people that I will be helping them purchase or sell a house of theirs, but it's just not happening right now.
Create an opportunity
That's
for
it.
them.
Right?
Okay.
So here's some buyers. Well,
and someone can have a buying opportunity as well as a selling opportunity too.
Right. So I wonder. Go ahead.
I'll just say hopefully both every time. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, so coaching, using command to go through coaching. One of the conversations I like having with agents is, what does your pipeline look like? And most of them have, well, I got this guy, and I got this girl. I got to call them back. I forgot about them. And or someone's like, well, I keep a spreadsheet, right? Okay, well, where are you at? You should be. every day trying to move that to the next thing, or at least know what the next step is. By using this, especially if you're visual, you can see all of the people, right? Your goal is to take a lead, to make them into a contact, and then to make an opportunity for them, and then to work through how to get them along. So I can sit down with you, I can see all your opportunities. I say, okay, how are we going to get this guy to the next step? How are we going to get this guy to the next step? How are we going to get this person,
So this person, I just took a phone call from on Friday because of a listing that I put up, and I'm going to start sending her emails and try and develop a relationship with her because I'd like to have her as like a signed contracted buyer, right? But I don't yet. So I had already created her contact and command. I came in here and I'm just creating this opportunity. And so she could be cultivate, meaning I don't have an appointment yet. But let's say I get to a point where I set some kind of an appointment up with her, right? A consultation, something like that.
Yeah.
Then the stage becomes, am I scheduling the appointment? Have I already scheduled the appointment, or have I kept it?
Okay.
Right? Because when you, I gotta move you guys because I can't, there we go. I can't see my button at the bottom. When I create that, and let me go back to the pipeline. Buyers. So cultivate appointment, right? When you're scheduling an appointment for someone, command is going to assume that there's a 10% chance that you're going to convert them into an income producing client, right? Once you've already scheduled the appointment, now there's a 20% chance that they're going to turn into something for you, right? And then once you've kept it, it goes up to 30%, right? Now, when they sign and become active, there's a 50% chance that it's someone that's going to buy something. When you start showing them things, right, the percentage goes up, which is why it's fun. Like I just moved that one to under contract to start, moving the tiles around, because then that's going to change. That's going to change these numbers, right? Potential, probable, right? As those percentages start moving, as your person moves through that pipeline, those numbers start changing.
So Sharon could sit down and say, I've got to lead generate each day. I've got to get new people, right? And then I also have to follow up. Well, who would I have to target? Well, follow up. Well, I've got to follow up with the potential $200,000 in GCI that I've identified. I just have to move along to whatever works for them next. And some things you can do, some things you can't do, but this gets you excited because this shows your pipeline. It's visible.
I like it.
So, and with time, like here's average days and stuff like that, the more information you start to put in this, there will be a time when command is going to be able to tell you what your conversion rate is. Because it's going to say, oh, you contacted this many people, you had this many appointments, so many of them turned into signed agency agreements. From that, so many of them turned into actual properties, and so many of those actually closed, right?
I'm assuming that's under reports.
I'm sorry?
Not yet.
I'm assuming that goes under reports.
Not yet, but it's going to, but it can't do it until we start putting information into it.
Right.
Right? So that's that.
Okay. Awesome. So let's move back to sellers. On the flip side, regarding buyer presentation, did we already cover this buyer presentation? I guess we should wrap up buyers.
Yes,
we did. Okay.
We talked about it. Yep, in command.
So on the listing, and there's a buyer's presentation in there, and whatever you want to make for yourself. Listing side, the process is very similar, but you obviously are representing a different party. So working backwards in terms of getting all of the paperwork signed for a seller, it's important upon a listing agreement in order to do that, or at least when you start investing your time and money. Even if the seller's not ready to sign or to list that day, right? They're preparing things for the house, getting that document signed to protect you. So if someone comes along and wants to buy it for sale by owner, they don't just call you and say, hey, you're out. Take it from me. I've made the mistake. I invested money in video, photos, and everything. And then she never signed the agreement. And
same things happened to me.
Ended up going with someone else. So learn from our mistakes. But when you get a listing opportunity, you're going to get an appointment to set up the time. Again, just like the buyer, it's important that all decision makers are there, that you have done your homework. You're preparing your market analysis in order to present to the seller. And ideally, doing all of this work ahead of time, rather, too. I'm just going to fast forward through there. If you have the time, the opportunity to preview the homes, especially the ones that are competition. If it's a deals that's pending or a sold property it's in your report, go drive by it. Make sure that you are, especially if it's not in a neighborhood or an area that you know, drive through, check out and see if there's any for sale by owners, because you might not have included those in your CMA, but the seller sure as heck knows that they're there.
Yeah, some homes are easy to comp because they're, every other house in the sub is pretty much one of 2 or 3 different floor plans. They're all built in the same, couple years. That's much easier. But if you're in a place where there's any question and things start getting a little gray and you have the time, you should absolutely go and look at other homes that are the competition. It'll help you in your conversation with your seller as well, right? And it'll help with your confidence.
For sure. There's a whole class on listing presentation, so I'm just going to breeze right through this, okay? But you're either going to get the document signed right there and then, or a second appointment or follow-up, depending on their motivation and whatnot. But once they've signed, you're going to develop essentially what I try to do is work backwards from, this is our target date to list, to go on market. What do we have to do between now and then? And that could be photos, professional photos. If you need at least 2 days turnaround and you want to pre-market the home, that it's going to be 5 days. So if they need, we're not going to be ready for photos until this date. Okay, so we'll work backwards to make sure that you're helping along the way. Some people want to get things done in the yard, right? We've got to get mulched up, spruced up. We've got to get this painted. We've got to repair this. They've got a list of little items to do. Sometimes it's decluttering, emptying out the garage, whatever it is. So you want to make sure you're clear with the seller in terms of that timeline, so you can help them, or you can also hold them accountable to doing those things and adjust as needed. You've got the listing paperwork started or signed. You need to go and get the listing started. So creating the listing in the MLS, and if you're lucky, it's been previously sold or listed in the past, and that's somewhere to start. But oftentimes you're going to go through the arduous task of putting all this stuff in. Justin did it when he was doing a mock listing during the last launch. And it's a lot of work, right? But you're also asking a lot of questions about the house and learning a lot about it. So just piece of advice, don't call the seller every time you have a question about the home, because it'll be a lot of conversations. Do what you can, and then maybe take the opportunity to set up a time with them to discuss, to get to fill in the blanks. Maybe they don't know. Sometimes I have sellers that are like, I don't know. You have to obviously find the answer somewhere. So you just want to make sure you're allowing yourself enough time to do that. May mean, yeah, go ahead.
Something that I do is I'll print out that whole, not always, but sometimes I'll print out that whole Real Comp form on paper, and I'll go through and fill out all the parts that I know, like it's on a paved road and it's sewer, sanitary, whatever, city water. And then I can have that with me when I'm on the listing appointment, if it's a opportunity and they're ready to sign and we know we're going. And I can just buzz through it and say, do you have a sump pump? Okay, yes. Do you, and I'll just kind of go through it quickly with them, right in front of them. That's, another way of doing part of it.
Yeah. And if maybe you didn't tackle that at the listing appointment, but you're back at the house for photos,
yes.
You could do it then, or something to that regard. But yeah, you need to get all of that completed, and then make sure that listing is ready to go. So it's creating what we call a partial save. So you're basically creating the draft in the MLS. It's not live yet. It doesn't have photos to it, but it's a work in progress. So it allows you at that time to complete that, upload those photos, and just and go live right when you want it listed, in order to set up showing time and do all that kind of stuff. But again, I like having a target date to list and then work backwards. What day of the week to list a property at? There's no right or wrong. I think whenever the sellers are ready to, but what I like to do is Tuesday or Wednesday. In order to, why I like that is because typically on Sunday evenings, Mondays, Tuesdays, people are busy in normal world, right? People are busy and they're kind of doing things in life. They got activities and this and that. They're not necessarily thinking about that next weekend yet of what properties for sale. So when you list on it like a Wednesday, it gives it enough time to syndicate to all the websites like Zillow, go on people's portals the next morning and such, and it allows them to see it, to set up a time, or to reach out to you to schedule an appointment with their agent, or for them to see an open house. I like having an open house the very first weekend the property goes on the market, right? So, up until May, we'll be able to continue to pre-market it. Like, so on a Saturday or Sunday or Monday, we can say coming soon, right? And it's not on the MLS yet. And really the goal of that is to gather buyer leads. Now we do have this new feature. I don't want to talk about it too long, but what is it? The coming soon status, which is new, right? So you're going to have a list date, and that list date is when the property is viewable by the public and agents can schedule showings. But that's why I kind of like working through that timeline. Once the property is live, you want to ahead of time make sure that a sign is in the yard, the lock box is on the door. Our office has a policy to use electronic lock boxes now. These don't cost you any money. However, there's been talked about a shortage of them, and really just because they're saying that our office has enough allocated that you should be able to borrow one from someone else. I'm not going to get hung up on it. You can borrow one from ours or whatever, but these are electronic lock boxes that get signed to agents. So I have a lock boxes assigned to me in the system, and that other agents can make sure that they access it through their app and keep record of it. It's just important to have it, make sure ahead of time you have that. It's on the door. Your sellers make a copy of a key if they don't have one already. Your sign is in the ground. So when you have that date or ahead of time that date, you're just ready to go, right? You've set the expectations with your seller that we're going to start having showings, right? The process is going to allow them to receive requests via text and email that they can approve. I set the expectations with my sellers that if there's a specific day or time that we can't accommodate showings, let me know that now so I can block it off so people can't even request them. Because there's nothing worse than a seller who just like starts declining showing requests, because you really want them to be in a position to accept any and all, right? It's going to be inconvenient. If they've got pets or kids, it's super inconvenient. So maybe you talk about the opportunity with them ahead of time to put the pet with someone else or stay with the family or do something, right? Because it can be a little arduous. When you make your listing go live, you're going to make sure that your copies of your disclosures are up attached to the listing. So what sucks is that you can't do this ahead of time. You can only upload docs once you actually hit like listings live. It's really weird. I don't know why it does that way, but you have to be ready to do that. So you have the PDF of the seller's disclosure. You have the PDF of the lead-based paint. You've got a PDF of anything else that you're disclosing, or HOA docs that you want to include, or a list of upgrades that the seller's done, or whatever fancy about the house that's not just in the listing that you want attached. Be ready to upload to the MLS when the listing goes live.
The seller's disclosure and lead-based paint must be uploaded within 24 hours after your listing goes live, or you could get fined.
And it's in your best interest to make sure it's right away so that all potential agents can see that, right? Because they're gathering that, maybe they're pulling that, they're reviewing that, they're discussing with their buyer to schedule, a showing. So make sure, don't be that guy. Make sure the contact information in your listing's accurate, meaning it's got your best way to contact you, your email, your phone, maybe even an email that you want to make sure that your email or that offers come to. It's written in the agent description. You can never over communicate things. Okay. You're going to get showing requests. They're going to either accept or decline them. They're going to go do them. Hopefully they're going to contact you if they're a great buyer's agent. Hopefully they're going to give you feedback if they're a great buyer's agent. You're going to have to set up showing time. We'll show you how to do that. It's basically just, who do you want to be notified when showing request comes in? Because obviously it's not just you, it's your sellers. Maybe it's just wife. Maybe it's husband and wife. You need to enter their information into showing time. It's typically just their name, email, and cell phone number. Do they want preferred text? Do they not do text? So it's all dependent upon your type of clients, their technological abilities, right? If it's an older client, you don't maybe not want to do the text. You just need to, make sure that you communicate with your seller. At the end of the day, it's about your seller. How do they want to review? If you set them up and it's only email, well, maybe they're going to get an email and they don't check their email every second, right? So you want to make sure that you're putting yourself in a position where you don't have to babysit every request. Mm-hmm. Although you will, when you see a request come in as a listing agent, you'll be anxiously waiting for your seller to accept it, right? Yeah. It's just inevitable, but doesn't mean you can check out completely. But if you set expectations with your sellers, you'll be able to be that much easier. Hopefully, yeah. So you'll get an offer, and it's kind of a similar process that we talked about before, right? You're on the receiving end though. You're going to experience tons of different buyers agents, and the communication level with them is going to be all over the place. But you're going to receive an offer, and you're going to negotiate with your seller, and from there, I don't want to jump ahead and say, it's the same, but it's very much the escrow process is similar.
So should we kind of put this on hold at that point of getting an offer to continue the next time? Because it seems like a good kind of pause point, rather than doing it in the middle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So where we're left off, sell side, you get an offer, and then we'll go through the rest of the escrow process there, and then we will. What else do we have on session? I have to look at
they'll be doing a mock listing.
Okay, awesome.
So we can go over that next time.
Okay.
Right. Cool. So try to get onto Katie's thing tomorrow about DocuSign. And then if you have specific points of clarification that you need, write them down, email them if you want, so that I or we can kind of look into it first, right, to make sure that we have the answers. And then, I don't know, we could probably set something up on Wednesday maybe to just kind of go through it.
Yeah, I know Trevor's got a class today at 2 on Command.
Oh, perfect.
If you're still feeling a little weird about Command or whatever, try it. We're recording all of these classes, so they'll be uploaded to the YouTube page. Keep in mind, we have coaching and we have the Market Center, right? So the Market Center is going to have all Market Center trainings, office meetings, those kinds of things will all be there. The YouTube channel for coaching is just our coaching stuff. So 2 places to go. And as always, between now and the next time we talk, if there's any questions or comments or anything like that, let me know.